Flosstube. My name is Becca, and I'm SamBrie Stitches here on Flosstube and Instagram. And this is another edition of Interview with a Flosstuber. I'm feeling very, very honored today, and a tiny bit nervous. And usually I'm not nervous. Sitting here with Jacob of Modern Folk Embroidery. He has been kind of crowned the king of Flosstube by many of the fellow Flosstubers in our community, which is a pretty awesome title. But he's also a very amazingly talented designer. I really enjoy his videos. They're very laid back, but every time I watch one, I always learn something, which is kind of a neat thing too. And there's always a bunch of enabling that goes on when he shows his patterns. So if you have not checked out his channel or the website or anything, all the information is going to be linked down below. And you can go get enabled because it's just an amazing channel. So usually we jump into the questions and stuff, but I was wondering if you would go a little bit into the history of modern folk embroidery before we get into the interview questions.
Of course, yeah. And thank you so much for that nice intro. That's really sweet. I'm starting to blush. It's
all true.
So I started well, it wasn't a business when I started it. Basically, I was on holiday, and this is about, I guess, nearly 12 years ago now. And I was at my mum's place. At the time, I was living in the UK, and I was visiting the Netherlands briefly. And you know how these things go when you're with family and you sort of your hands start itching, because my mum is a very creative person. She's a maker herself, and you go like, oh, I feel like doing something new that I haven't done before. And I was trained as a painter, but you don't always take your paint and your easels and your canvases and all that stuff with you when you go on a holiday. So I was like, my hands are itching. I want to do something. And she had this really nice cushion right on her chair. And it had this beautiful little cross-stitch piece on it. And it was like a tiny, tiny piece that she turned. It was a very old piece, about 80 years old, into a nice little patchwork sort of cushion. And it was gorgeous. And I was like, oh, that looks nice. I'm going to draw that. And I'm going to stitch that as well. Now, I knew nothing of cross-stitch. So I started stitching this thing on a really fine sort of cheesecloth, which I think must have been about 50 count, with synthetic sewing thread, which you should never use because it melts when you start ironing it. But I didn't know anything. So I was like sitting there making this miniature thing. But it got sort of, because I had done cross stitch when I was a kid, and it brought back the joy of making something like that. And sort of, especially the drawing, the chart part, I found that so much fun. So I thought, like, how could I do this in a way that the chart becomes nice? Because I didn't like the grit paper and the pencil. So I was very much into graphic design as well at the time, and I had Flash. So I used Flash, which is also like a really silly way of making it. But I knew nothing about software and all these things. So I made a grid and started filling it in. And then I decided, like, oh, I'll make my own patterns, because what I wanted to stitch wasn't out there at the time. At least I hadn't seen it. And this was also the sort of the very early days of online shopping. So a lot of really amazing designers were not online yet. So I knew nothing about cool charts and stuff. So that's me starting out a little bit. And then I showed it to some people, and they said, like, well, you know Etsy, right? And I knew Etsy already. And they said, like, you should put that on Etsy, because maybe more people would like to stitch those things. So one thing came to another. I started making more patterns. And then a really lovely lady in the US, in Oregon, she has a really good blog, and she blogged about one of my patterns. And suddenly that brought a lot of footfall to my shop. And suddenly I still have customers from those very early days. And it's amazing, because that meant for me that I knew that what I was doing was something that people seemed to be liking. And it was really an encouragement to keep doing that. And that's something that's so important when people lift you up, that you get a little bit of recognition, like, we like what you're doing. And that's such an important thing to, I think, always to tell people when they do something, like, I really like what you're doing. So so that was pretty awesome. And that's how I got really into it. And then years moved on. I kept sort of working on the side with a day job. But at one point I was like, you know what, I should make the jump to do this full time. And I think that was about 5 years ago. And I've not regretted it a day since. It's just been amazing being your own boss and doing what is your hobby and being able to make a little money out of that. I mean, that's just such a privilege, right? It's like it's just it's sort of the dream, yeah. So it's very exciting. But that's how I started, yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. It's amazing how, and that's similar to like us floss tubers, when one channel, like a larger channel, shouts out a smaller channel, you know, then their channel gets flooded. And I love that. And the same with designers. So it's a really neat thing for the community to support its members, and just that little blog post, or not little, but that blog post that you got just opened the floodgate to where you are now is amazing.
It makes such a huge difference. And I think it's such a little thing to do as well. You know, like when you have an audience to talk about someone else and sort of to share something that someone else is doing. And it's so nice. I wish I could do it a bit more. And I often think I do it too little. But the problem is that there's so much content out there and I just don't have the time to sit and do it all, because I have to design and I have to do the emails and I have to do this and that and make patterns and do research. And I can't, when I'm working on my patterns or when I'm working on my research, I can't watch Flosstube. I really wish I could, but it's too distracting because I constantly have to sort of look. I can't sort of have Flosstube really in the background like that. I do when I sort of have my stitching time, then I do put it on because I really do like it. But usually, and that's the problem as well, I have about 10 Flosstube channels that I sort of very loyally watch. Mm-hmm. But watching 10 channels and all of their videos is quite a lot every month. Mm-hmm. So I have to sort of, I feel like I have to watch those 10 Flosstubers and I really want to watch them. And then they said, like, oh, check out this one. It's like, okay, I'll check out. And then I really like that channel as well. And it's like, oh, but I can't watch them all. So it's quite tricky to do it. I've got a bunch and I wish I could watch many more.
Well, yeah, and I get that. I think somebody told me, and now I'm sure it's well over, but somebody had told me that there's a list somewhere of about 800 Flosstubers, and that was a while ago.
Wow.
And for doing an interview series in my videos every 2 weeks, like I'm trying to reach all these people, but there's so many.
Fantastic. It is so nice that you're doing this. Honestly, it is really, really nice. And I watched a few videos and I really need to sit down and properly watch all of the interviews. I saw Yamir, you were interviewing, and so yeah, there's lots. I'm stuttering. Lots of lovely people, alliteration there. That I need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I interviewed Darcy. That took a lot of coaxing and convincing.
Fantastic. That's so cool. I haven't seen that yet, though.
You got to watch that. It was a good one.
I need to check that out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got, because this has been a really, really crazy, well, couple of weeks, but this has been, especially this week was mental, where I have not been able to watch anything except for one video this morning because Caroline put something out. Because we released together with Caroline, we released a new pattern, which was out this morning. So we both did our videos today. And I was like, I need to watch that video as well before I record my video, because I want to know what she's saying. And then I can sort of, like fill in a few things that was really nice. But I have said to myself that next week I do want to, and maybe tomorrow, I want to set some time aside, not doing anything, and just sit, stitch, and catch up on videos, because I have a lot to catch up on. So I definitely will check out Darcy's video and some of the other ones that you have.
Awesome. I think you'll enjoy it. Darcy's pretty awesome.
I'm sure I will.
All right. Well, let's jump into the questions. It was really neat to kind of get to know the history of modern folk embroidery.
I'll try to keep them a bit shorter, because this way we'll be here.
It's okay. I've had interviews that go a couple hours and interviews that go 20 minutes. We're good.
That's cool.
All right. So the first question is, why did you start a floss tube, and were there any particular motivations?
Yeah. So folks were asking me for quite some time, like, you should do a floss tube. And I was like, what's floss tube? So I was like, I don't know. YouTube, that sounds really, ooh, no. I don't like YouTube. It's like, YouTube is basically just sort of videos of cats. And there's nothing wrong with videos of cats because I watch them, but I thought like, should I go on that? Nah, that's not for me. Fast forward a couple of years later, you should do flosstube again. People sort of saying, it's like, the word flosstube keeps popping up. What is that? So me going online, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. This is not like what I thought it was going to be. This is really, really awesome. It's just basically people like me talking about what they like to do, which is so cool. So I thought like, but I'm not going to do that. And then it was last year, and I sort of was thinking like, I have things that I would love to share with people. How can I do that? And then someone mentioned again, it's like, are you finally going to do a flosstube? And it's like, you know what? I might have to now. So I got a camera, and I'm still trying to work it. Today's video, I noticed when I was uploading it, I had messed up some settings because I got some new gadgets on my camera, and it's all very cool, but more gadgets means more learning curves and stuff. Yep. So now I need to sort of learn about white balance and all that stuff. And it was set to auto, which meant that constantly, every time I moved my hands, the white balance was messing up on the camera, and it gave a weird flicker. But I was like, you know what? It's all okay. You can hear me, you can see what I'm showing, and it'll be good. But yeah, so that was sort of like people asking me, do you want to do a flosstube? And then finally sort of like finding out how awesome it actually is. Yeah. It is really fantastic. And what I have really fallen in love with is the idea of community. And I didn't think that would exist, actually. When I started out, I saw a couple of people commenting on each other's videos, but I had no idea about the sense of community that you get once you actually start making your own videos. And it is really cool because you see these names popping up in your comments, and it really makes you happy when you hear from Mary or from Elizabeth or from John, and you go like, oh, that's like, hi, like, it's nice to hear from you. And I do try. Yeah. It's so good to see those names on your channel and reading them. And I do try to sort of at least acknowledge them by giving a short thank you and a reply, which is sometimes difficult when you have a whole lot of comments to go through. But it is really nice. And one of the handicaps is that it's quite difficult to on older videos when you get comments. So it does happen sometimes that I comment on something from 2 months ago when I realized like, oh God, that was actually a proper question on a really old video that I've never gotten back to. Oh. Yeah. I think it happens to everyone, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
But I think also, like, when it's really urgent, people will reach out through you. I mean, I have a website with an email address, which is always, which I always say, like, if you have urgent questions, send me an email. It's better than in the comments, because it's always easy to miss them. But yeah, I just love it. It's such an amazing community, and I love when the community comes together for a stitching brother or sister who is having a hard time, and but just simple things like, oh God, Ellie is missing DMC whatever from this dialogue. Does anyone have it? Because the new DMC is like different. And then people immediately goes like, oh yeah, I've got some stash here, I'll send it to you. And it's just such beautiful kindness and generosity. And it's that's nice. And we need that, I think, in this time, which is just
yeah. Our community, and I say this in a lot of interviews, is amazing. And the funny thing is, like, I bring my stitching everywhere. So I bring it to work, and people are like, oh, how do you do that or whatever? And it's got to be so boring. You got to be the only one that does that. Comments like that I get. Not so much anymore, because I've done it for years and now they know not to say that. But yeah, I have to explain to them that the community is so much larger than, people think. And there's the Flosstube, there's the Instagram, and our stitching community, I think, is one of the most generous and the most supportive group of people that I think I've ever really been a part of. And I didn't realize that, because I'm coming up on 2 years on Flosstube, and I just started it to kind of branch out and you know, try something new, find some new friends that I have something in common with. And I've had, you know, subscribers that have been there from day one that when I see their names pop up, like you're saying, I love it. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, an old friend, basically.
Yeah, it is. You know what is the weirdest thing is when someone has several usernames. So you've known someone for years on Instagram, and then they have a YouTube channel with a different name.
Yep.
And they have been posting since, you know, day one that you've been doing. And then suddenly you sort of realize that, wait a minute, you're that person. And that's so weird. It's like, oh my God, I have known you for forever. And it's like, and this is this person. And it's just really, but it is very cool. But yeah.
It's pretty amazing. It really is. Our community is awesome. So the next question is just a subscriber question, and they were just wondering if you had a blog.
I am a horrible blogger. So yes, I do. Is it active? No, it isn't. It has the last post I made was last year in August, and it was the 2020 Stitch. No, 2020 never happened, right? Right. I forgot what happened in 2020, but it was 2019 that I did my last blog. I was like, was it the last? No, 2019. I did the last blog post, I believe, and it was the blog post on the August design game. And for the 2019 stitch along, I had like these panels. There was literally like 12 panels in that you could sort of stitch all next to each other.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the August part, I wanted to play a game where instead of, I did give a pattern for those who didn't want to play the game, but I had, I don't know how many pages there were, but they all had little elements on it. And I said, print them out, take your scissors, cut out the bits that you really like and stick them on the graph paper and make your own pattern. That pattern is still available, by the way. It's quite a fun pattern. It's and it's only €1.65, isn't it? Yeah, €1.65, and you get basically a ton of little things. And what I like is that you don't only need to you don't need to stitch the massive stitch on it. That's not your thing, but it's quite a fun resource to sort of just for people who don't have the heart yet to start designing. It comes with empty graph paper as well, but you want to play around a bit. I would say just print it out. There's also tons of free stuff for people if they want to do that. That's cool. But I would encourage just people to just try something like that. It's so much fun. But yeah, basically that was my last blog entry, and that was August 2019. And I remember when I made that one, I was like, oh yeah, I'm really getting back into blogging now.
Nope.
That was 2 years ago. Yeah, I'm just really, really bad at it. And I don't know why I can't put myself to blogging, because doing a video vlog type thing like a Flosstube is a ton more work for me, because I have to do research, I have to get all these images and then sort of edit the whole thing. But there is something about the direct contact that you have talking to a camera, and which is really weird, because I thought I hate cameras, right? I am phobic when people have to take my photo as well. Thank God for the digital age that you can take 100 where you can sort of go through the best one. Right. Because I have a weird habit of just going like those types of photos, you know, like where you're always the one in the background that sort of does like a weird, or like I have to like not look like my face is melting. So I sort of go like for half a minute, like look really sort of dead-eyed, and I hate it. I just don't like photos, and I don't like cameras either. So I thought I would not like vlogging for that very reason. Yep. But it's weird, you kind of forget the camera after your first video. Your first video is awful. You are very, very sort of aware of that horrible black lens sort of staring at you. But once that's gone and you've had the interaction with the people who actually watch you, you actually talk to those people. Yep. And it's a very odd thing. You don't have this sort of weird thing like, oh, hi, I'm Jacob and I'm crazy because I'm in an empty room talking to myself, which is the first video, isn't it? It's so weird.
100%.
It's like, I know you guys by name now. I know your comments. I know you all are really wonderful, lovely people, and it's so nice to sort of just do that. So yeah, no blogging for me anymore. I think maybe I should just take it down and use the space. I probably would do better to just sort of not delete the blog, just keep the link up for people who want to see it, but not have it as prominent on my website, because it's literally the first thing you see when you go to my website right now. And it's bad when you have a dead blog. The website is still very much alive. It's just I don't really do. I'm just thinking I should put my floss tubes on there, maybe.
That would be good. Definitely.
So suddenly a bright moment here. Yeah, I think I should do that. I think that would be probably better to do that, where people can just sort of see the latest.
The latest stuff
when they go to the site. Yeah,
that's anyway, a good idea.
A good one. Thank you for that question, whoever asked that.
Love it. So where do you get your design influence from?
So for those of you who know my work, you'll probably know that my original designs are quite sort of traditional folklore inspired. And the inspiration of my very first, like I said, like the very first pattern that I saw as well, was like this very simple folklore pattern. It was very abstract, like a sort of a star flowery thing. And when I saw it, it struck a chord with me. And it was something of I don't want to say recognition or something, but sometimes you see something that you kind of feel emotionally, that resonates with you as a person. I remember as a kid only seeing sort of back in the 80s, sort of seeing these really colorful kits of teddy bears and balloons and all that stuff. And that's cool. There's I don't want to say anything bad about that, because there is a space for that as well, and people love that stuff, and that's awesome. But it's just not me. And you just know yourself. It's like music, like one person will love classical music. I love classical music, and the other one will say like, "Oh my God, can the violins please stop screaming?" So it's all good. It's like, one person likes something, the other person doesn't. Teddy bears with balloons is just not my thing, and there was a lot of that going on in the 80s and the 90s, and even when I started, there was still a lot of the magazines were sort of producing those patterns. And then I discovered sort of old patterns, sort of folklore Scandinavian stuff, and that really was like, wow, this is amazing. And at the time my husband was doing some work in Scandinavia as well, so we would go to Sweden, not fairly regularly. That sounds like we were there daily, but yeah, we went there a couple of times a year at one point, which is an amazing, if you are in Europe and you want to do a cool journey by train, going cross country by train on a boat through Denmark and then crossing into Sweden is absolutely wonderful. But there is a wonderful museum called the Nordiska Museet in Stockholm, and they have a fantastic collection of traditional crafts and art from the Nordic world. It is literally the Nordic Museum, but the focus is very much on Swedish arts and crafts. And in one of the rooms upstairs, there is this wing where they have a ton of beautiful traditional crafts, and one of the side rooms has these enormous drawers with big sort of, you pull out drawers. And the first time I was there, I literally spent hours in that room just going through it, taking photos, and just being so inspired, not copying the stuff because it's museum collections and I don't want to touch that, but just the visual language. I didn't know where to find stuff like that online. I didn't have books. I bought a whole stack of books from their museum shop as well, which is amazing. But yeah, that really inspires me. It's that sort of Scandinavian sort of, it's very simple language. It's usually monochrome, one or two colors, and still I find simplicity in antique samplers as well. It's what really appeals to me. So I've the last couple of years I have been charting more antique samplers and doing reproductions and stuff. And in the beginning, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's not for me," because there's other designers that do amazing jobs with that. And then I started collecting samplers, and that got a little bit out of hand.
Oh geez.
Yeah. So that's one rabbit hole that you don't want to fall. Well, maybe you do actually, but yeah. So once you start going to auctions and online auctions, and you keep an eye on these things, and you kind of know what to look for and what not to buy and what to buy, and you need to have a really good awareness of a cutoff point what you want to spend on something, because it's very tempting to keep bidding on something that's very pretty. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I have now quite the collection, and it was a couple of years ago when the collection started to grow. It's like I felt really bad, because it's like, this is like, in a way it's egoistic as well if I don't share this with other people, because it's sort of either hanging or sitting in a drawer, and I'm the only person that gets to enjoy these beautiful things. So I thought, like, if I reproduce these charts, if they speak to me, they will probably speak to other people as well. So that's how I got into that whole yeah, can I say minefield? Probably, because it is a bit of minefield, because it is it is so amazing, but it's literally like yeah, once you go there, it's like, I used to live in the UK, so my focus was in the beginning very much on English Scottish samplers, but because England is not a part of the European Union anymore, there's now a hefty import fee when I buy an antique sampler. So I've not bought any antique English samples for quite some time, which is a right shame. And if I do, I send them to a friend of mine in the UK, and then later I will pick them up once I visit the UK again.
That's smart.
It's not fun. It's one of the reasons why we moved as well from the UK to the Netherlands, because my nationality is Dutch, and I didn't want to have to end up in that fun house there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. So my focus has slowly shifted to Dutch and European samplers, because I kind of discovered, I knew that Dutch samples were pretty awesome, but I didn't quite know how awesome they were. So I started looking more into that now. And yeah, I've been buying a lot of Dutch samplers. I actually got 3 samplers, and it's literally like I have to sit on my hands, because I really want to take photos and share them with everyone. There's one literally,
that's going to be hard,
within arm's reach, and I want to pull it and show it to everyone, but I can't, because one of them will be a cool project with Caroline. One of them will be something big next year, and I can't say much more than that. And the other one is just a really nice one that I'm really happy with, and I might use little bits as like, not the whole sampler as a whole, but as a pincushion type element, which is
very exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
So I've actually had viewers ask this question: when you're shopping for antique samplers,
yes,
what do you look for? Like, how do you know if it's legit? I guess that was their question, because I guess there's so many people trying to pass off, more current ones, or some, I don't know if there's fake ones out there, but how do you know?
There's a lot of fake ones out there, actually, and it is a problem. I know when you go on eBay, it is a bit of a it is really hard to maneuver through places like eBay.
Yeah, eBay is the dangerous one. Yeah,
it is really, really dangerous, and because technically PayPal and eBay protect you as a buyer. So if you would buy something and it is not legit, you could return it, and if you buy it through PayPal, they should give you the money back.
Yep.
But there are a couple of factors that the seller then might sell. Well, actually, it was not stated on the listing that I was selling a genuine antique one, or I was not aware that this was not an antique one. And the whole thing can become so problematic with having to return it, and those costs get on you because the shipping has been paid, so you need to pay for shipping anyway.
Yeah.
Especially when it's international buying. If I buy something from the US from eBay and I have to ship it over, I have to pay a hefty import fee. I have to pay a huge amount of like all the taxes, and the shipping itself is super expensive. So by the time I have the thing and it turns out to be something that I didn't want to buy, I've actually once bought a print of an antique sampler, and the seller was convinced from the US that it was a genuine sampler. And when I got it, it was like, yeah, but this is a print, this is not a sampler. And that person was really kind and said, like, you know what, I'm going to refund you the money and just dispose of the sampler as you see fit. So I gave it to a local charity shop, because I was like, I'm sure someone will really appreciate the print,
Yes.
And, but you could see, but if you, like, I have really good eyesight, so I immediately saw that it was printed on paper. But if your eyesight is not like 20/20, you could look at that and go like, that's a genuine sampler. So it's really difficult, and especially judging by photo on a screen, you can't see whether it's the real deal or not. One thing that I have found which helps to find out if it is a real sampler or not, if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. It's either fake, it is a print of a sampler, or there is something else dodgy going on there. If you don't find a Quaker sampler for $20 on eBay, that just, like, from 1795, that just does not happen. It can happen. I missed out one item on eBay, which was the real deal, and I was devastated because this person sold it and pulled the listing while I had put a bid on it, which was really annoying. And they sold it for way too little. And it was, the Boxer samples from England, sort of like the Tudor, sort of late Tudor sampler period. And this person sold it for £100, a Tudor band sampler. A
big one. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I told him, and I said, like, where's it gone? It's like, it was still the highest bid. I was like, oh, yeah, someone offered me, like, a little bit more than what you did. And I was like, well, you do realize that that's a Tudor band sampler, right? Like I hope you got at least like a couple of thousand for that. It's like, no, I didn't. Should have gotten more then. It's like, yeah, you should have, because at auctions, they literally go for thousands, those things. So it's like, Bristol samplers, same story. I just saw an auction again, and it was about in dollars, probably about $4,500. At least those samples, they are extremely expensive because there's not a lot of them, and there's a huge demand. Quaker samples as well, they are immensely expensive. However, 19th century samples, especially from the second half of the 19th century, they can become very cheap, and you could score something for $30-40 easily on eBay. But it's a very odd thing. You have to get lucky with them. You have to. My criteria are not, is this sampler valuable or is it rare? That doesn't matter for me. I've literally bought samplers that have massive holes in them and are in a terrible state, but it moves me when I see it. The image attracts me, and it has a value that I possibly can sort of recreate it digitally. And then sort of by stitching it up and making a reproduction, I sort of bring back that sampler. And sometimes if there's enough information on the sample, I can kind of tell that story of the stitcher and what she tried to sort of tell with her sampler. And that for me is really exciting when you have those things and you can sort of, like get those things. So yeah, buying online, one tip I can give is when you see a name on a sampler. For instance, you see, let's see, I have here Anne Ferguson, and it says 1842 on the sampler that's hanging to the next to me, and it's a Scottish sampler. What I would do is I would, in Google, between brackets, I would put the full name of the girl as it appears on the sampler and the year as well. So I would put in Anne Ferguson between brackets and then 1842. And then the only hits you should get on Google is either that eBay listing or if it has been sold in the past. You should not suddenly get 100 listings from museum this or print shop that, because if you get that, then you know that it is a reproduction or someone has already charted it, and it is probably a stitched model that someone is selling. So that's a really easy way to find out if it has been charted, if it has been released or something like that, or if it is in a museum collection. It will show up when you Google it. So yeah, that's something that you can easily do before buying. But in the end, it's best to, if you get the chance to have a look at it, is it really stitched on linen? If you are not certain and you're going to put your hard-earned money towards something, ask for better photos. Ask for close-ups. For instance, just looking at the linen. When you have, for instance, so this is something I've stitched up recently, right? And that's Zweigart linen. And we all know what linen looks like now. Linen back then looked different. It has a different feel, it has a different texture. And that's something that you probably will sort of get through experience as well. Mm-hmm. But if you have a sampler that claims to be from 17 something, and it is stitched on like a kind of a cottony thread, something is off. That's like cotton even weave did not really exist at that time. Okay. One of the samples I have is on a cotton even weave from 1844. And it's interesting because it's one of the first ones that I have seen from that period on that material. And usually it's much later that they start using that, but this is one of the first examples. And it was around as this, because this is a genuine sampler. But if you see stuff like that from even further down the line, then it becomes fishy, and you can sort of put really big question marks at a sampler and at its sort of, at its realness, so to speak. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I love that. I think a lot of people will value, the advice that you just gave. I know I've received a couple questions when I've, interviewed some of the designers and stuff like that. That'll really help some people. So I appreciate that.
It's all about, like, you do have to take some risks because I still buy stuff now. It doesn't happen a lot, but every once in a while I will get something that I'm really disappointed with, or that I think like, it's not as great as I thought it was, or it is like in a way worse state than I thought, judging on the photos. But I've had it the other way around as well. Like, one of the samples that I bought is the real deal. It is in stunning condition, and when I saw the photos, I thought it might be a fake. Oh, wow. And I still bought it because I looked up the name and I couldn't find anything. And I thought, like, this hasn't been charted. So if it is stitched by someone who charted it themselves and copied it. But I wasn't sure. And it was just one photo of the listing. And I thought, like, I have to be quick, because if this is the real deal, it will be snapped up by someone. And it was like a buy now type thing. And I bought it. And I'm super, super, super happy because it is the real deal. It's from 1830, I think 1835. Wow. And it's stunning. And this is going to be something for next year. And I'm literally sitting on my hands not to.
I think I can do that. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you designers do it, where you're working on and you can't share it, and there's like sneak peeks. I don't think I could do that. I'd be like, I just want to show you.
It's the worst. It is the worst, because especially when you have a floss tube. I've had like one period where I was working on cover art for this artist from Germany, and I still can't share it because he hasn't shown it yet. I'm like, please start showing it, because I want to share this thing with you so badly. I've sent it off to Germany now, so I don't even have it, so I can't even do a physical sort of thing. I should have, really stupid, I should have recorded something where I was showing it to the camera. And I didn't, but I have photos, which is good, so that's at least something. And you will be able to see the artwork actually on Spotify, which is kind of cool. But it's really frustrating. Yeah, it is really cool. But it is so frustrating when you can't share that, because this was literally a couple of weeks of me stitching this one project, start to finish, just working really hard at it. And I had a couple of projects. So I had that one, I had the Mary Harry one that I just released with Caroline today. There was, what was there? There was like 2 other things that I was stitching up that I couldn't share. And it's like, I want to share these things. And then I did the floss tube, and I was like, right, this is me. I literally have nothing to show you today because I can't share anything. I've done so much work, and it looks like I've not done anything, but I literally can't share anything with you. And it's, my God. Then I just have to show a few old things. Like that's a good excuse as well to just, get like the box of doom and
go through that. Yeah.
Find the many projects that I haven't fully finished that are just sort of like, it's done, yay, into the box.
And then it's in a box. Yeah. No, I don't know how y'all do it. I really don't. That would drive me crazy. So the next question is, how did you learn to stitch, and how long have you been stitching?
I learned it as a kid, and I don't remember who taught me, actually. I thought it was my mum, and I think my mum taught me. I do know that my auntie taught me how to knit when I was staying over at her place once when I was very young. But I think it was my mum, and I think the only instructions she kind of, because cross stitch is super easy, right? It's like you have a piece of like linen-like material, whatever you use for your first project. I think my first projects were on, I think it was a cotton even weave or something like that I got. I don't even remember. I remember it being very white, and I remember like how snobby was I? I remember not liking the pure whiteness of it, but it hadn't occurred to me to do some dyeing of that. But yeah, and I started stitching. I remember using 2 strands because you had to. Like the notion of being able to stitch with one, that did not exist, at least not in my head. It's like you must use 2 strands of DMC, and the only instructions was sort of like, oh yeah, you go in through one hole and then you go 2 threads and then you go down again and make sure that all of the crosses are in the same direction. That's very important. And that was like, okay. And oh yeah, and don't make massive loops on the back. Try and keep it neat. That was kind of the only instructions. And it was only like many, many years later that I sort of learned actually how to properly cross stitch. And then Getting the Proper Stitch. I don't know if you know that book by, oh God, I am the worst when it comes to names. Now I don't know her name, and it's really, really terrible. It's like a must-have thing. It's like a ring-bound volume. It's really good. The Proper Stitch it is called. But if people Google between brackets the Proper Stitch, and then it should show up. It's like a, it's kind of like an alliteration type name, I seem to remember, but it doesn't come to me. It's a fantastic title, and she also mentions, and later I found as well, like she also mentions the proper way of starting your cross on the linen, and I didn't know that was a thing. So I always say, like, I learned it when I was a kid, but I am still learning, because it's like that one simple stitch sends you down the rabbit hole, and then you kind of learn more stitches. So it sounds, I'm really sorry, it sounds like I'm plugging my new pattern, but Mary Harry is actually the first pattern where there is actual proper specialty stitches, which I had never done, because I'm not an expert anyway. You know, like I know how to do my crosses and I know how to do back stitch, and I can do over one, but and eyelets, because everyone can do an eyelet. It's not difficult either. But I hadn't done anything with Rococo or Queen stitches on it, and this pattern has. So I had to sort of like, you know, look into how I could incorporate that in the pattern, and how I could also do a diagram of showing how to do the Queen stitch. And it's dead easy. It is literally the easiest thing ever. But it's one of those things, when you see it stitched up, it looks like, God, this is a really complex stitch. It's like lots of steps, and, you know, like, and I think the diagrams make it look way more complex than it is. It's literally, you go 4 times, you do that, and every time you do that little loop through the fabric, you tack it to the middle bit. So you tack one there, you tack one there, and you tack one to that side and one to that side. And that creates this beautiful little diamond. And that's literally all it is.
Wow. You just made it sound so much easier. I've never done it.
It is dead easy. Honestly, try it. It's so much fun. And you know what is really nice? It's like when you have a border and it requires you to do eyelets, just swap them out for something else. You know, do either rice stitches, which are super easy as well, or a Rococo stitch is actually quite fun to, you know, like, just inserting your stitching a little bit. So I do plan to, because I have a beautiful Scottish sampler, which is quite heavy on the Rococo stitch. So I do plan on incorporating it in a few future projects as well. I think it's a fun stitch. So yeah, still learning, really. It's like there's so much stuff that you learn. And pin stitch, just learned that, like, I think last year someone was sharing that, and I was like, oh my God, game changer. I don't start anything now without pin stitching. It is so amazing. It's so neat, super strong, no ugly loops. The whole away waist knot thing is fantastic as well. I kind of discovered that one on my own for some reason. I was like what if I start doing this on a straight line? It's like, oh, this is nice. Now I don't have to sort of,
Right.
spend time with the, on the first bit where you start, which is one of those things. But you keep learning. I think you keep sort of discovering new things, and that's so nice about FlossTube as well, that you hear things of fellow FlossTubers that have discovered something new. And apologies if my chair is creaking because it's really
you're fine. But yeah, no, I agree. I think we're all still learning. Even people who have been stitching for 30, 40 years, there's always something new. Especially watching FlossTube. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's really, really cool. Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious on this one. Do you have a favorite project that you've stitched that you can talk about or show?
Well, there's a couple. Do I have it at hand? Let me just have a quick look. Okay. I should have grabbed these things. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Well, kind of my latest is always my favorite, right? So this one I have I got a nice, see, I have just done a FlossTube this morning and now I've put stuff away.
That happens.
Which is how it goes, isn't it? So
yep.
Get my little board. So this is one of my favorites that I have just finished because
I just bought that.
Have you?
Yes, I am gonna start that. I love it so much.
This was honestly, I have so enjoyed working on this pattern. So I forced myself to do Edgar Allan Poe's name first. Fun fact: Edgar Allan Poe is not spelled with an E in Allan.
Oh, really?
It's so dumb. So I started this one, and I thought I knew how to spell that name, but it's Allan. It's not Allan Poe, but it's like one of those things that's once it's in your head. So I had designed the whole thing. I had made the artwork. I had done my FlossTube, and then I looked at the pattern and I looked at it, and I was like, I hadn't released it yet. That was the saving grace. And I looked at it, it's like something is off, and I couldn't. And it's like, did I just spell it with an E? It's like, oh my God. So I had to change it. I had to change the pattern, change all of the stuff. And then I released it with the correct thing. But it did show up as the inset image on my FlossTube. For those, it's, I think, episode 13 towards the end, I was asking people like, which one should I stitch? Should I do this one or the Poe one? And yeah, you can see it actually in there. I found out after I had uploaded the video, I was like, it's too late now. I can't redo the whole thing or re-edit it. It's like, it's fine. But this one was a lot of fun because I forced myself to stitch the name first, which is in negative stitching, which is a lot of fun. I love negative stitching, and that's the same with the bones here and the plants. It's sort of like a tombstone type thing here. So I really enjoyed that one. And this is something that I showed this morning as well, which I stitched as well while we were on holiday. Oh, and that's sort of, it's kind of based on Frisian patterns. I'm just looking where, oh wait. You want to see my box of doom?
Oh yeah, let's see the box of doom.
Oh dear. So this is an old painter's tin, and it has a leaden sort of inside thing. And this was this is Dutch, and it says white. So they must have stored white pigments or something.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But it's wood, but this is actually painted to look like more expensive wood.
Oh wow,
which is really cute. So it's it's a lovely box and has a sliding thing. So there are a couple of exciting things in here. I really like this one. This is a very, very small period sampler, and it was in fairly poor condition. And I am really bad. I have to. Her name was Jubilee, but I'm going to go to my own website to remember what the girl was called. The thing is, I know so much about these girls now, but I can't remember her maiden name for some stupid reason now.
That border is really pretty.
It is
Love
such
that.
a lovely sample, and I stitched this on 40 count, and her original was worked in wool, and it was nearly completely moth eaten. It was in a really bad state.
Wow.
Yeah, Lillian Baldwin. She married a gentleman called Jubilee, and she lived on the Welsh, sort of the English Welsh border in England still.
Mhm.
And I had the privilege of speaking to her grandson, which was
Oh,
absolutely fantastic. I tracked down the family, and they still live in the town of Ruadine and
neat.
down in that area. And he was very young when she died. I think he was about 12 when she passed away, but he still had proper memories of his grandmother. And he remembered the sampler hanging in her kitchen, because he said, like, yes, because it said on the back of the sampler, it said Ada Lillian Baldwin, and then it said like when she had stitched it. So I did like a whole bunch of research. But the problem is anyone can scribble any name on something and it doesn't really mean anything. But because this gentleman, who was very old himself, he was very old, he was a bit deaf as well, it was quite difficult to talk to him over the phone as well, but he said like he did remember the sampler. And it was very special because it gave the confirmation like this is really her thing. And she was a mother of 11 boys, just remember, like a whole soccer team. And she was a very clever lady because they were poor, they were miners, all of the boys, but she kind of made her own fortune by, she was buying up these really derelict old, basically crappy buildings, and the boys, when they were a bit older, they were able to fix them up. So they would either start living in them or they would rent them out to other people. And that's how she got the money. And she actually gathered all of the money that the boys made. They would pay their mother with their weekly salary.
Okay.
And then she would distribute all of the money that she had to the sons that needed it most. So the family that had the most children, they would get the most money. The one that was like single, he would get the least money because he had only one mouth to feed.
Right.
And that's how she distributed it. And it's just, I thought that was so fantastic. And it's so wonderful to be able to find these stories and then share these stories. Right. And then, but also to sort of discover those things and hear people talk about these girls, because like we see these antique samples and they're great. But there was a real person and they had a whole life and all these things. And it's, I think it's really exciting.
I think it's amazing. It's amazing to learn the stories and the history behind it. I'm not a huge like reproduction sampler stitcher, but I love hearing, the stories and the history of the piece is just amazing.
It is really exciting when you find out these things. I'm sorry, I'm not like ignoring you. I'm just sort of digging through this box.
You have a lot of stuff in that box. Oh my god!
This is a box full of finishes. So literally, like, going to sample Swedish horses, like a Swedish star thing, one that hasn't been released yet, which I should really do, but. This one is very exciting. I call this the Nicole family sampler. And I think it's really darling. And it is really sweet. See, look at the cute little house and everything.
Yeah.
And I really should release this one. The awesome thing is with Scottish samplers. I'm sorry, I'm a bit on a tangent now.
No, you're fine. I love this.
But you see all the initials right here.
Oh, yeah.
So Scottish samplers have a habit of putting family initials on their samplers. And usually the very first initial that they stitch is either their own initial or it is the initial of the father and then the mother, then the siblings, often in chronological order.
Interesting.
Now, the girl who stitched this was no exception. The only problem that I had was that she didn't date or sign this sampler. So what do, right? You just have a couple of alphabets and then a couple of letters, and it doesn't mean anything. Now, I thought, like, I'm going to do research. So I went on to the Scottish Ancestry website, and it was like you get so many hits with just initials. So I narrowed it down, and I thought, like, okay, my guess is that this was the father, this was the mother, because that's the only last name that is, different, as because women they kept their maiden names.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, like, okay, so this is the father, this is the mother, who has a different last name. And then there's a whole bunch again with the same initial as the father's initial. So I thought, like, okay, they're all N's. They must be the children then. So finally found, like, after hundreds and hundreds of couples with the same initials, I found a bunch of girls. And then I found siblings. And I thought, like, okay, these initials match, these initials don't. So, like, for instance, if there was like a certain letter within the siblings, I would sort of cross that off and get to the next one.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I came to 2 girls, and I, like, this is from my memory, I can't remember whether it was an A or an, let me just see. Yeah, A. I think there was an Anne and like an Anne or an Alice or something like that. There was 2 sisters, and they both had a name starting with an A, and one of them must have finished this, because what she did was, this is her father, W.N., I think it was William Nicol, and then the mother, H.D., and then her initial next to it. And then in chronological order, all of her siblings. And it matched to only one family. So I have absolute certainty that the girl was called Nicol. I know that. I don't know which one of the 2 sisters stitched it, but I do know roughly, as they must have been around 12 when they stitched it, as most of these girls were, roughly the year. So I think it was about 1829 to 1836 that I calculated this would have been stitched in. And it's kind of cool when you figure that out. It's like, this is awesome. But this is on the list. But every time I have something else that I need to work on, and then a booklet, and because there's so much information that I have on this family, I want to do it justice.
That's cool. So I don't know if people realize just how much research goes into some of these. You just explained that sounded like it took some time to sit there and narrow it down. That's incredible. If you don't have,
it took ages, and the stuff I discover is literally what I share in the booklet, and what I share on Flosstube is literally the tip of the iceberg. Like the pattern that we released today, which was stitched in Pennsylvania, and I discovered so much about this family, not so much about the girl. That's the funny thing. I couldn't find a ton of information about the girl herself. It's like, kind of sort of, there's a few little data bits that I found, but her earlier roots, especially her Quaker roots, because the Quakers love to write everything down. So I found tons of information about it, and that also meant that I could link her to Richard Nixon, because one of the Quakers was I think her great-grandfather was Richard Nixon's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, like, 8 times great-grandfather or something crazy like that. So she was not an ancestor, but she was like whatever it is, like a great aunt type situation. Completely like it splits off quite far then when it's your great grandfather, of course. But I thought that was kind of cool to sort of discover that one.
You're like blowing my mind right now, because I really didn't know the behind the scenes of all these, samplers and stuff. This is incredible.
It is really exciting. So I can't find the one that I wanted to show you, which is really annoying. No, it's not here. There is one. It must be in the. Oh yeah, I know where it is. It's downstairs in the box, but I won't show you that one. People can find that one if they go to my website. It's called Agnus Dei. It's like a big. I'm the funny thing is, I'm not religious, but it is a very Catholic religious piece. But I do love music, and I do love the Requiem Mass, and the Agnus Dei is one of the texts in the Requiem Mass. And it means the Lamb of God, and it is the pattern. It was used. I interpreted from like a photo in a book, which was literally like a stamp format of probably a filet crochet type situation that was hung on an altar. But that's one of the favorite projects I have worked on, because it was such a massive project to stitch. There was a ton of process in that, and I worked on it on several journeys. It was one of those projects that I had put away, and then I didn't work on it. Then I felt really bad, and then we went on holiday once, and I said, like, you know what? This will be my travel project, because hey, why not take a ginormous thing with, and
Right.
this was before Pattern Keeper, so it was literally like, you know, I was sitting there like with a whole ton of pages and trying to sort this out while traveling on the train. But a great conversation as well, because it was really lovely having chats with people. But yeah, two things that jump out to me: the deer in the field of stars, I believe this is called. It's a very simple pattern, but this sort of is really sort of inspired by like sort of Swedish traditional designs. And the fun thing is that nothing on this pattern is actually traditional. I all made this up, but you will find bands like this in you know, traditional Dutch and Scandinavian sort of stitching. And you will find deer that look a little bit like that. Like there's a really ancient tapestries and stuff that have these crazy deer. But when you work small and you design something new, chances are pretty big that you will find something that looks exactly like it. And of course, the star flowers that you see here, you see them on anything from Quakers to Dutch samplers to anything.
That's so pretty.
And the other one that I really enjoyed, I think I stitched this in, did I use wool? I think this was stitched in wool, I'm not sure. But that's this one here. And it is, oh God, I can't remember what this was called. Christmas border pattern. I am really terrible with names, by the way. As I said earlier as well, with the authors, I can't even remember my own names. And I have actually had people say like, oh, I like this pattern. And I was like,
well, I mean, you have a lot released, so
which one is this again?
You're not like a walking encyclopedia.
It's really bad, but like I feel like I should know these things. Yeah, it is. I thought it was a winter border sampler, and I kind of played with a element from Sipmacher's book. Sipmacher was a German sort of Renaissance book printer who made these pattern books, and they were hugely influential on sort of European development of cross stitch, literally all over the world, because his books were printed, and these were the first kind of proper stitching books that were shared. But there was something similar to this. I changed it a fair bit, but when you see Sipmacher's book, you will probably recognize this one.
Those tags are incredible.
These letters were adapted from Icelandic tapestries, which I really liked, and they are very cool letters, I thought.
Yeah. Wow,
and then I designed bands again, sort of inspired by that sort of Sipmacher style of borders. And yeah, this was a lot of fun to stitch, actually. And I love stitching borders. There's something so satisfying, because once you start going, and it's not a reproduction, because reproduction borders are a nightmare usually, because there's always tiny little errors that the girls made, and you have to count them and not use your head, but literally just count every single stitch off. But yeah, it's very sort of zen, because you look at one small part of the pattern and then you just go and you just work on it until you reach the end of the bit, and then just hope that you didn't make a mistake where you have to go frogging.
Yeah, I think you're in there's not I've not seen very many people who like to do the borders. I'm not a border person, so I'll do like a little piece of the border and then a different, and then go in sections, because
yeah, no, it's a weird thing. And there's a couple of people. Some people hate alphabets, for instance. They just can't stand them, and I love that. It's like, I really like doing letters, but some people just don't do borders well at all. They just go like, nah, can't be bothered.
Or I'll just leave it off if it's a smaller piece. That's what I hear quite a bit. But no, I'll stick it in chunks.
I have seen some samples. I think Hands Across the Sea samplers has a beautiful reproduction sampler. And the funny thing is, it's not something I would buy. It's not my normal cup of tea at all, because I like the simpler samplers, but it is stunning. It is, I'm not sure Ellen Reed might have been stitching that one, or is working on it, or it was either Ellen or Nikki Noodle. I forgot. One of the stitches anyway on Flosstube was working on the sample, and they were saying that they would not stitch the border, but just stitch the center part, because that is also really, really stunning. And I thought, like, I can see, because the border is literally like, well, probably 3/4 of the design area. It was a massive chunky border full of animals and flowers and birds and things. But it's a huge dedication, because it is just ginormous. But yeah, that's a stunning. She's got some lovely samples as well.
Yeah, she does. I did an interview with Hands Across the Sea.
Oh, fantastic!
Nicola and Sandra, both of them together, which was pretty cool. So
I have to look at them all. I will tomorrow. Honestly, I'm going to sit down with
that was
a lot of coffee and a lot of stitching. I've got a couple of projects I'm honestly dying to stitch, and it'll be good.
Well, the nice thing with the interviews is you can sit and stitch, and there's really not any need to look up, except for if somebody shows their favorite project that they've stitched or something like that. So you're good. Absolutely. You're good. You can just turn them on and go. We'll move on to the next question, and that is, what do you enjoy most about stitching?
Ooh, everything. It's like I said earlier, like doing borders. It's like it's such a zen thing. It's like, especially because when I do the designing and I do the research and then do all that stuff, most charts I actually don't get the chance to stitch myself, which is sometimes really devastating, because like I really want to stitch everything, because that's why I make it. I wouldn't be making patterns if I did not want to stitch them. The same when I buy samplers now. It's if I see a sampler and it speaks to me, then I will buy it. But there has to be that moment of click where you want to stitch something. But for me, it is literally just the joy of stitching is literally just sitting down and just the peacefulness of it. It is such a beautiful Zen thing to just sit, either have some flosstube in the background or an audio book. But often with audiobooks, I keep rewinding, because I sort of, the little counting bits. Yep. And I was like, oh God, what did they say again? And I find that quite hard. So audiobooks I don't do too much when stitching. But yeah, it's just wonderful. Even just sitting in silence. I really like to sit in silence. Yesterday, I stitched for about, well, where is it? It's this one here. It's a new sample. It's not been released yet, and I'm so excited about this one. It's this is the right way. This is 1 day of stitching, and it's about, I think I did 1,600 crosses yesterday, which is a bit mental. But I was like, I'm gonna.
That's a lot.
But the thing is, I got up quite early, and then I stitched in total about 5-6 hours. Pretty much back-to-back stitching, like focused, sitting, just working. And that was all done in silence, just enjoying just the silence. And because it had been such a hectic week and there was so much that I needed to do. And then, that was just beautiful. So it is also something that's really good to sort of just let everything flow away. And
Yep. That's why I don't understand why I get so many comments like, I don't have the patience to do that. Or, comments like that I get when people see me stitching. And I'm like, if you tried it, it gives you just this Zen calming feeling. It has nothing to do really with patience. You kind of get focused and relaxed. And I try to explain that to people, because that is, I would say 90% of the comments of people who don't stitch, that's what I get is, I don't have the patience for that.
I think it's also an excuse to say something that people, they like it, but they just don't want to commit to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's a kind of a fear of like, oh God, I could never do that. And they kind of don't want to admit that to themselves, but you could, because and I think, so my sister, for instance, was the most uncrafty person I knew when I grew up. She literally despised anything that involved needles, fabric, or threads. She infamously had to crochet a pig, and she will love me for telling this story, but she hated it. And I think it was one of the very few projects that she kind of started, and my mum might have finished it, I'm not sure. And I was a kid who loved it and actually got punished in school for making things, because my mum was such a creative person. She made dolls as well. And at one point we had to make this it was like a kind of a doll on a stick thing. And I had modeled this had sculpted this thing, and it was really awesome. It was like a Punch and Judy type thing, and I had by hand and on a hand sewing machine that I had, like an old Singer hand sewing machine. I had made this, you know, like a Joker type hat with bells, and I had made these pointy things, and it was awesome, and I was so proud of it. And the teacher really, really, really loved it. And then some jealous kids were, oh, his mum made it because, you know, like she makes dolls. And then I got a really crappy mark on it. And I never forget being so angry that, like, just the injustice of me having put in so much effort, and that should have, you know, the American equivalent of an A+ for the level it was when I was a kid. And I think I got like a B- or whatever it was. And because the teacher just believed that surely a boy could not have, you know, sewn and sculpted and painted and done all of these things. And so, yeah, it was quite funny that my sister was completely the opposite. And then it was, I think it was last year that she started watching what I was doing a bit more, and she started watching my floss tubes, and she was like, you know what? I want to try that. And I was like, you know, my mum and I were both like nearly in shock, like, are you sure? Like, are you having a fever? Should we call a specialist? And she was like, no, really. I this sounds amazing. You know, like I want to try this. I said, like, well, it's like, just let me know what you want to stitch. Just let me know what you need. I'll get it for you. It's like, well, mum has linen, mum has threads and needles and everything. So we settled there. But if you can send me PDFs, absolutely. Which one do you want? So I sent her, and she's been stitching that, and now she's working on project 2. So she's made a fully finished, like a hoop art thing that she stitched, and she did. And she's like a real perfectionist as well, my sister. So it's like when it's not perfect, she will pick it out and do it again. And I think I'm much more of a like, oh, I made a mistake. Can I replicate this on the other side so no one will notice? And which works fine. I will only frog when it's like a huge error, like when a border doesn't match up and you can't sort of, you know, fudge it. Yeah. But when it's like, oh, this leaf has like 4 crosses instead of 3. Yeah. Repeat it on the other side. No one will notice. It's like that. The thing is, like, girls used to do that all the time. So yeah, but yeah, I think like that's just the way it is, isn't it? Like everyone can learn to pick it up. I think so. If they put a bit of effort in. Yeah.
Yep. If they want to put in the time, for sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of time, we'll go to the next question. That was kind of funny. What is the time frame and process from like your initial vision of, you know, a pattern to when it's being released?
You know what, it differs massively. It is literally pattern by pattern. I've had patterns where I woke up with an idea. I sat down literally before my first morning coffee, sort of sketching it out really quickly, getting some breakfast, and sort of sitting here behind my computer, like I actually have coffee here, which is cold, but still I need the caffeine.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And then it just sort of, it flows and it comes out so quickly. And then by late afternoon, I have the chart ready. I have the artwork ready. I have written the text that goes along with it, because it's an idea that you know, like that it's where the ideas always linger. And, you know, like you can be basically walking along the beach and you get an idea and it sort of simmers, and then just all these things just pour out really quickly, and you know what you want to tell with the pattern. And while I'm designing it, I'm constantly thinking. So it's then literally a matter of just wording it. And by the evening, suddenly there's a pattern in my shop that I started that morning.
Wow.
That has happened a couple of times. The opposite has happened as well, where I have a pattern and I love the idea of the pattern. I love sort of where it needs to go, and it just doesn't want to get there. And then it's put in the folder on hold with a working title. And it's like, oh God, it's not good enough. You know, like, and then you keep going back to it and you keep sculpting, and it's like a proper struggle. But it always starts with the inspiration of the little spark that you have. But that can be literally anything. And I wish I could say, like, it's not that I don't want to give anything away, because I think, you know, I love openness about the design process, but it's literally like a little spark that just happens, and then you start. And for me, well, you probably have noticed now that I like to talk. 3 hours later. No, but it is, stories are really important for my work. So if there's not a story, it's not interesting for me to tell that story as well. Even if the booklet has a very brief story, there has to be some kind of a story in that pattern. And that is usually the creative springboard to sort of get going from. And yeah, that needs to be there. And that's the biggest sort of step for me. And once that is there, then the design process sort of kind of happens. And if you're lucky, it is a really beautiful flowing thing where in one day you have at least the pattern ready. There is a project now that I've been working on for years, which is still in my head, and it's still not finished. But I know that once it will be finished, it will be, at least I hope it will be, really cool. But yeah, so it's really difficult to sort of say this is how it works. Yeah, that's
pretty amazing though, that some of your designs are just within a day. That's crazy. So
it's I wish I could stitch that quick.
Yeah, me too. That's nice. Just knocking out samplers left and right. Come on now. So we're gonna get out of Stitchy Talk a little bit. We're gonna learn a little bit more about you. And this is, what's your favorite genre of book or movie, and music, if you'd like to throw that in as well.
Oh God, well, you know what? I am not as big a reader as I used to be, because I'm so busy with designing. And then when I'm not designing, I'm doing research. So and I don't want to say my reading is very boring, but it is deeply fascinating, but it is all research based. So it's not very exciting today I read this interesting article about Frisian names, which is literally like a whole essay of like, I think about 20 PDF pages about naming conventions in Friesland. And the funny thing is, that's literally something I read and I kind of store in my head, and then when I need to pull it out.
So if you enjoy reading it.
I love it. It's so fascinating. But that was like one of the things I read today, and I found it really fascinating to read about it. And but yeah, then they're not great sort of to pull out on a dinner party. So like, well, this was interesting, what I just read. But it is for me, at least. But I used to be a voracious reader. I used to read literally everything Stephen King. As a kid, I was a massive Stephen King fan. And I have recently gotten back into King. I've read a couple of books again, all audio books, because I need to do stuff as well. And because I'm so busy, I don't have the time to sit with actual physical copies. Nothing goes above that. I really like books, and often I actually buy a physical copy to have and smell and go through the pages, and sometimes just look up stuff as well. But I also will get the audio book, because I can just listen to that traveling and sometimes stitching, as long as the audiobook is not too complex to listen to. And so that's something I really like. But I like kind of slightly heavier literature. I used to love that when I was younger as well. One of my favorite authors was a Dutch author called Harry Mulisch, whose magnum opus was called The Discovery of Heaven, which is also turned into a film. Emma Thompson's husband plays in it, and he directed it as well, I believe. And Stephen Fry, he's also. It's quite an okay movie. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but the book is amazing, and his books are fantastic. So yeah, they're great to read. But yeah, you said for the rest genres, yeah, it's difficult. I love classics as well. I just don't have enough time to read all the books, sadly.
It happens. I mean, you do a lot of research, which is still considered reading, and it's very interesting. So yeah, definitely. Do you have a fictional place that you'd most like to go to?
I'm watching The Lord of the Rings again, and I have read the books a couple of times when I was younger, and I absolutely loved it. And it's really weird that out of all the places, it's the kind of the early stages of the Lord of the Rings, when they set off in the beginning, you know, when Mr. Frodo and Samwise, when they first set off. And what I really loved, which didn't end up in the books, is Old Man Willow, I think his name. No, not Old Man Willow. He was a murderer, wasn't he? What was the old guy called? He didn't show up in the film. I think he saves them from Old Man Willow. Oh. He was this old sort of giant man, and they have this amazing cottage in the woods where he lives, and he gives them food, and time moves very strangely there, and it's all very strange, and they feel very comfortable, but then they have to sort of move on. And I always really, really loved that, and I kind of loved the idea of Lothlorien. But seeing the films, it's really weird. It's beautiful, but it's also kind of kitschy. But it's also somewhere where I would love to visit, if that makes sense. But to be honest with you, I just prefer a forest much more. So we went to Freiburg last month, because it is last month now, August. And it was amazing. We had a heat wave, but just walking through the forests there, and just sort of, and I got a bit of a sense of Lord of the Rings, and that kind of sort of that mountain landscape thing, so I guess the early stages of the Fellowship, where they still go through the pleasant bits of the forest.
Right. Forests are amazing, and a lot of the people that I've interviewed, Lord of the Rings is one of the big answers.
I bet it is.
It's amazing doing these interviews and talking to all different types of stitchers. And not only do we have stitching in common, but asking these type of questions, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, those kind of things, our stitching community also has in common, which is really neat. So other tastes. So I love asking questions like this.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's another person who loves that, and it's just great to see how much more our community has in common other than stitching.
What does the Yeti behind you say? Don't stop
believing.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
My big football.
It's great. I love it.
I love it. Let's see. So if you could choose to do anything for a day, what would it be?
Well, this is a really crappy answer, but I already do what I want to do every day of my life, kind of.
Not a crappy answer. That's amazing, because not very many people get to do that. So
exactly, it's there's so much privilege with me that I have a job that literally, which is people's hobby, and I get to do that every single day. I genuinely, like, putting me on the spot, what would I want to do if I could do anything? Probably have the ability to just go travel like this, because I would love to travel properly again. I would really want to see places and not having to worry about anything, and having to worry about 24-hour flights to the other side of the world, because I'm a big travel fanatic. So I would love to have the ability to sort of go and I'm in Japan.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
It's such a, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. I love that. So do you have any other hobbies besides cross stitch?
I don't have time for a lot of hobbies besides cross stitch. I do crochet a bit. I just threw something on the floor. My studio is a mess, by the way. Now, usually after a floss tube, my studio is a nightmare, and now I just have taken out the box of doom, and I've thrown out half the projects.
But we appreciated that, though.
It's a bit terrible, but yeah, I do crochet. So I'm making a.
I'm
sorry, the lighting is really bad. The only lighting I now have, because it's gone really dark here, it is really getting autumn. But the only lighting I get is this beautiful dead light from my screen on my face. I'm not sure how flattering that is, but this is a take on a granny square, and I really like it. I came across this in a cross stitch book, and the idea I had 2 months ago was to do one or two of these squares each evening, while watching some nonsense, when we sit and after dinner and watch some Friends or something that doesn't take too much attention, where I can sort of crochet a little bit, because this is literally autopilot. Once you've done 2 of these, you know the pattern and you can sort of kind of continue. But I got this far.
Wow.
Quite a few, but I need about 5 times more this. I have all the materials. I took tons of cotton to Germany with me. Did I touch my crochet hook? Did I? So yeah, but that's kind of the only crafty thing I do. I paint and draw as well. I was educated to be a professional artist. That is my background, really. I've got a bachelor's degree in, as my husband says, a gold paintbrush, which is a very, very mean thing of him to say. But yeah, I am a trained fine artist, whatever that means. But yeah, I do like that, and I wish I had time to do everything. But right now, this is something I'm really passionate about as well. And to be honest with you, I think just doing what makes you happy and what you really enjoy is, for me, the most important thing. And it's still a really creative thing that I can do. So that's a great thing. So yeah, that's sort of the only craft
outlet.
Yeah.
So what about singing, mister?
Yeah.
All the FlossTube intros you've been doing.
Yeah, it's there are a couple of more that people have not shared yet. And the thing is, I would love to do more for people, actually, but I just don't have the time. And I actually made them in a time when, I don't know if you are like me, when you need to do your taxes and you need to do some other things that are really depressing. And then you think like, what can I do that's not urgent?
Right.
So I am a master procrastinator. So I was like, ooh, let's make Betsy Klager a song. So, and I was like, this is so dumb, and it's so silly and so idiotic. And I love it as well, because it was never meant as a, like, here, Betsy, here's a proper introduction for your FlossTube. It was more as a joke, like, here, Betsy, I made a really dumb song for you. And I did that for a couple of people, and they actually used it as their theme song now, which is really funny. But yeah, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I've kind of gone back to work mode now, and I would love to do more. But yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, I have always really loved music. I was trained to play flugelhorn, which I hated because I didn't like brass, but everyone was given those instruments when I was a kid. And then I played some other brass instruments because I got braces. They became bigger and bigger and bigger. Hated it even more. Taught myself to play the saxophone, which I absolutely loved. So I had a beautiful baritone saxophone when I was younger. And I have taught myself quite a few instruments. So I always say I play a whole lot of instruments extremely badly, which is fun when you record stuff, because I can just sort of, record the best bits of a take and then sort of paste it in a bit. So and it works. I could never do like a session musician type thing where they say like, oh yeah, you go and play this solo. It's like, well, how many takes have you got? It's like, it's literally kind of that terrible. But I do enjoy it, and I do like the to have at least an understanding of different instruments and stuff. And I have always been writing music, and that a couple of years ago it became a bit more like, I became really obsessed with writing music next to doing my stitching stuff. So I released an album. It's a piano album, which you can find on Spotify. And it's under the name In Praise of Shadows. That's the name. It was based on the book by a Japanese author. And it was an amazing book. And so I named my music project after the title of his book. And because you can't have, you can't see things in more dimensions without light and shadow. So you need shadow. So there needs to be a happy, bright thing, but there also needs to be something that's the opposite of that in order to see the whole picture. And I found that quite interesting, and how it would reflect on music. So it's it's an album with I think about 14 short-ish piano pieces on there. So yeah, you can find it. It's called Ivy. There is also a bizarre dance track, which I didn't have a lot of involvement with, which somehow shows up as well. Feel free to skip that unless you're into dance music. But yeah, the piano album, that's really my thing that's out there. And I'm writing songs, and I'm working on songs with a really good friend of mine for her album as well, which is exciting. And yeah, there will be a song on my Flosstube very soon in relation to FAQ, upcoming FAQ session again. But yeah.
That is so cool. That is so neat. I'm definitely going to go check out Spotify now.
have a little look. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so where are we? Oh, this will be a fun one. How would your friends describe you?
Oh God, I don't know. As an absolute bastard, probably. No, I honestly, I don't know. And you would have to ask my friends that. I honestly don't know. And I wouldn't want to put words into my friend's mouth.
I don't believe you, yeah. I mean, some of your friends are calling you king, so that's pretty cool.
Well, let's yeah. I guess just, yeah, what other friends on Flosstube say, yeah. I find it really, really difficult because, yeah, I wouldn't know.
That's okay. That's okay. I think, I don't know your personal friends, but the friends that are on Flosstube seem to think very highly of you. You've grown close with quite a few, so yeah. So
of course they don't know me very well. That's why.
Love it. So how do you prefer to stitch? Do you in hand, a Q snap, a frame, that kind of stuff?
I love it all. I don't know if this is a cultural thing or not, but growing up in the Netherlands, I don't remember ever seeing anyone having a hoop. I think the sewing method was pretty much what everyone was using, and that's how I learned to stitch as well. It's like, this is how you do it, but then, once you know that cross, this is much easier. Like just sew those crosses on. And in the past, I would only stitch horizontally. I don't know if that makes sense. Like when you look at the back of your work, you pretty much have horizontal lines.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like that kind of look. I don't do that anymore because I do find that it sort of makes the crosses, instead of going like this, it does make them do that a little bit too much. So what I do now is I have a giant needle here, but I insert my needle like that, and then I do the next cross. I do this really weird thing of going back like that. So now all the crosses that I have on the back, there's one diagonal and then one horizontal line. So you create kind of a pattern on the back. And I feel that the crosses are a bit neater, and it also makes less traveling. Because when you do the only horizontal, you have to go over 4 threads to go to the starting point of the next one.
So less floss usage as well. Basically.
It's you actually save on floss, and you save. It's really weird. You save actually a lot. You don't realize it, but doing that method or doing the zigzag thing, if you would stitch a block of about 40, 50 stitches, you would actually, with the other method, you would get easily 10, 15 crosses extra from saving that. So it's all in all, you do save floss, and I'm Dutch, and stereotypically we're very tight. So, but yeah, so I learned to do hand sewing, but then I saw some hoop art projects. So I got some hoops, and I thought, like, you know what, the tension is really pleasant. So, and especially doing specialty stitches, I have noticed that you need the tension. So when I do my Rococo stitches or my eyelets, I always use either the hoop or Q snap. And I have, a couple of months ago, I bought, a couple of months ago, it's quite a few months ago now, I bought a Lowry stand.
Okay.
And I am absolutely in love with that thing. So when I work on very fine linens, and I'm talking 46, 56 count, that's for me. I know Yamir is amazing. She does everything like oh yeah, let's just get 100 count and stitch over one. I'm not like that. 56 is kind of the limit for me. Well, like I've done 60 count as well, which was like a cotton thing. But I do have to have that either in a hoop or on a Q snap in a Lowry frame, because it is just, it's so much nicer to not having to sort of struggle with that hoop or that Q snap. Right. Which I hate that, sitting there like this awkwardness of stitching, and it cramps you up. And
100%,
with a Lowry frame, it's just really relaxed. I feel my shoulders relaxing, and yeah. So I use them all actually, depending just on the project. If I need to do a lot of specialty stuff or over one, it goes in my Q snap. I don't use hoops a lot anymore, unless it's a really small section and I've already cut the linen. You know, and it doesn't fit the Q snap anymore, then I'll use a mini hoop thing. But I find that the hoops, because I really like to pull it really tight, and I am too lazy to do the whole. I remember on a Pfeiffer show, there's an amazing tutorial of binding tape and sewing it, and I'm like, yeah,
I don't do that either.
Nope. Ain't nobody got time for that. It's literally like, no, not for me. It's just like, I'm a really lazy stitcher. It's just, no, it needs to just click in. And I love it as well when people go like, oh yeah, and then you've got your, what do they call it? I call it mud guards, after, like you have on a bike, but it's like
grime guards.
Yeah, grime guards, not mud guards.
Close.
It's like, yeah, I can't be bothered about that. I just make sure that I do eat when I stitch, but I always wash my hands meticulously. And it's just a thing, I always wash my hands anyway. I can't stand having dirty hands. I really hate the feeling of stuff on it. So when I touch my fabrics and my linen, and it's good as well because I touch my antique samplers and everything, and you don't want greasy, you know. There's always oil on your hands, but you can limit it by just washing your hands a lot.
Right.
And I don't find that my stitching is very dirty for some reason. And and if it would be, I just chuck it in the water and give it a good rinse. And I've not had any problems ever with running, except for one sampler, which was stitched with some really dark black brown floss by Weeks Dye Works. And it bled so badly that now it looks like an antique sampler. It's amazing.
That's kind of cool. Sometimes,
yeah, it is. I wasn't bothered. It's like these things happen. I can't be bothered about it. Now it just looks like it was intentional and sort of.
That works.
You know.
I mean, some people use the walnut crystal or walnut spray or something to make them look sweet. So I mean, hey.
Yeah, whatever works, right?
Way to do it. Yeah. So. Do you have a favorite place that you've traveled, and did you bring stitching along when you went?
I have two favorite places. Japan, as I said earlier, I absolutely love that place. It's so beautiful, honestly. Have you been to Japan?
I've not, but my husband was stationed in Okinawa, so he's talked about it. That was before we met, but someday.
It's amazing. I just love it. And so there's not a lot of sand in Japan. It's a very sort of rocky kind of country. And the Japanese are very clean people anyway. They're very tidy. You know, you would never throw anything on the floor. So everything is very organized. But because there is so little dust, it is eerily clean. Because, like, you know, when you go to other countries, like where you have deserts and stuff, Japan is an island. There are no deserty stuff. At least, like the cities I have been, I've not seen any sandy bits. So because it's all near the sea, you have constantly clean air being blown in and hardly any natural dust. So and they are quite neat freaks, I think. So it's amazing. It's like the cleanest place I have ever seen in my life. But I just love the traditional architecture. I love the juxtaposition of the modern bits, like in cities like Tokyo, you know, the craziness of it. And it's a fascinating country. I tried to learn Japanese for 1 year. I studied it like properly at York University. There was classes that they were doing. I love that place. And the other country I really, really like is I didn't bring stitching, by the way, because I wasn't really into stitching at that time. It's quite a long time I've been there. And the same for the other favorite place, which is both Ireland, which I love. It's a stunning place.
List.
And I love Iceland as well, which is just amazing. It's so beautiful. And but they were all places where I went before I stitched, and it's kind of sad to me because I wish I had gone there knowing what I know now, because I would have visited places really looking up museums and collections and stuff where they have like antique textiles and fabrics, and speak to people there, and like learn stuff there while there. But I hope once we get out of the whole pandemic and we can travel a lot again, I really want to take my husband, because he's not been to Japan. I've been there years ago with my sister, and although my husband had studied in Ireland, he did his master's there. He did his PhD in York, where we lived together back in the day in the UK. But he only sort of went to Dublin and did his master's there. And I have seen a bit more of the west coast of Ireland, and it's amazing. So I really want to show him a little bit more the countryside as well. Yeah.
But Ireland is a bucket list for me.
It is
someday hope.
It is amazing. Yeah.
Very cool. So what can you not do without for your stitching? Like your favorite go-to must-have besides the basics? Yes.
Here. I've got a lot of scissors, actually. I at one point I was selling them as well in my shop, and not in my web shop, but like when I was traveling and doing like a fair stuff. But it's really interesting because they were kind of, I don't even remember. That's the annoying thing. It doesn't say which brand this is, but just look there. Very, I don't know if you can see it. They're black with a bit of gold and silver, but the point is really nice and sharp, and I just love these because they're perfect. They're big enough for it to be easy to pick up and snip. But it's just so handy, and I can actually cut in the linen if I need to, or in the stitches. I don't need a seam ripper or anything. I can just dive right in, and luckily I don't have to frog a lot because it's just the worst. But when I have to, it is there, and it's really nice. So a while ago I had misplaced these beauties, and I had to work with one that somehow my husband decided to cut some metal wire with my embroidery scissors. Thank God he did not use these babies, because I think that would have been grounds for divorce. But yeah, so I had to use this is the one, and I think, you can't quite hear it, but there is like a, when you
it catches
a horrible sound. And they are really nice scissors as well. Look, beautiful, and they were quite sharp as well. They were really lovely. Luckily we have a knife sharpener just down the road, like literally 20 meters from where we live, and I want to ask them if they can sharpen these, because they were good scissors, and they should be able to fix this, I hope. But it's a nightmare when you have a pair of scissors that just don't cut. I honestly, I can't even cut threads with these now. And I was literally going like,
and you can hear the difference. Oh,
this is horrible. So I had to literally, I don't know why, and I'm sure I'm not the only person, but I have an awful habit of putting something down, and literally 2 seconds later I just don't remember where it is. And then, why do I not put it on the same spot? Well, I know I cut something, and it's like, let's just put it on the mantelpiece here, or on the random shelves, or in a jar, or something stupid. And I'm like, at that time, I must have had some reason thinking like, I must not step in these scissors by leaving them flying here. But it's just like, But
I had to put scissor fobs on my scissors because I do that. And at least it's a little bit easier to kind of see them because you've got this big long fob, less likely to lose them too. But I
honestly, I need a giant, like a cushion attached to my scissors if I don't want to lose it. It's just that dumb. honestly, ridiculous.
It happens. I can't believe the cardinal rule for scissors is you don't use your embroidery scissors to cut anything else.
Exactly.
Oh
Exactly. I was in shock when he used, and he was literally standing there like, I just need to cut this. I was like, no. Yeah, too late.
You freeze before you can even say, what are you doing?
Yeah, but that's the funny thing. Non-crafters, they go like, oh, they're scissors.
Yeah, exactly. No, not the case.
No.
Not the case.
Nope.
This is kind of a fun one, and I'm curious because I guess most of the time you're stitching your patterns, but how do you decide on what you're gonna stitch on next for your projects?
This brings me to tears, nearly, because there's so much I want to stitch and I can't.
Right.
But it is usually I do stitch what I want to stitch, and if I don't want to stitch it, I have gotten quite good in faking my stitching now. So when you look at the artwork of my PDFs, I think 99% is fake. It's not stitched. It's not a photo of something that's stitched. It's just a graphic image that looks like it is stitched. And a lot of people ask me, oh, what was the linen that you used? Or what was the floss? It's like, it doesn't exist. It's close to DMC whatever, or Leo and Roxy whatever, you know, like a floss color that I can sort of link to that looks like it, but it just doesn't. But the good thing is, because they're monochrome patterns, I always say to people, pick what you like.
Yep.
I can't tell you to love DMC 3777. If you don't like it, it's not for you. Just pick the color that you like. If you like a really bright red, go for 666, which is literally like...
that's red.
That's a super, super bright red. I think 150 is a really good red as well, isn't it? Is it 150 or? I think it is 150. They're very intense reds. But my favorite is just 3777 because I know it is my aesthetic. It's that sort of a rusty red that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I like that color.
But you can literally, as long as you have contrast between your linen and your thread, you can use whatever you like. But yeah, to decide what to stitch, it's like I have gotten a little bit more monogamous in my stitching. I used to stitch literally all the things, and it has come up to a point where I had so many whips that I was like, you know what, I just need to now start and finish. So that's what I did with the pattern that I showed first, the Spirits of the Dead one, the Edgar Allan Poe one. And I literally sat down and I said, like, I am not allowing myself anything until this is finished. And that was the same with the other pattern as well, the pincushion thing. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to sort of being able to sort of do that whole process of sitting down and stitching. But it's difficult to decide on what to do next. It's it also is something like, sometimes it's something, can I share this already? Because I like to share at least some progress as well. So I like to pick a project as well that I can share with people. But yeah, it's always tricky. I
guess it's going to be kind of difficult for you because you do the floss tube, but you also stitch, you know, some of your patterns, and not being able to show it ahead of time makes it very difficult to figure out what you're going to work on and how you're going to do your floss tube. So
absolutely. And then there's all the amazing, literally, there's so many fantastic designers out there, and God, I would love to stitch them all. Like this here, this is Park Hopper Bart.
Oh yeah, I like his.
You should get him on here as well, by the way. I don't know, maybe have you?
Yeah.
Have you? Fantastic. I need to check that as well. See, there's all these people that I need to check out that you have. But this one was so much fun. And I think I had just finished something quite big, and I was in need to stitch something small. And then I saw this on Instagram, and I was like, you know what? This is going to be the first pattern that I'm stitching in literally since I started doing this, that I did not stitch myself. I'm just looking at the light, and it is so bad now. It's like this sort of...
Oh, you're fine, because we are on to the last question, so you don't have to worry about the lighting. And it is, what's the best thing that has happened to you within the past couple of years?
Oh, easy one. being able to do this full time. It's I have been, honestly, I think one of the luckiest people ever. So I did my, like I said, I did my training in fine arts, and because I was living at home, I didn't have to pay rent or any like huge bills and stuff. So I was actually able, and in the Netherlands, you actually as an artist get like a form of government support. I don't know how it is now. I don't think it exists anymore, but I did, which allowed me to have a tiny gallery, and I could paint there like a studio gallery type place, and I could sell my work there. So I did that for 4 years, which I really, really loved. But then I moved to the UK, and there I was like, okay, now I need a job. And of course, having an arts education is not really great on the market as a CV booster. But I knew that I loved books and I loved reading. So I was like, you know what? There was an opening in a bookshop, Borders Books. I don't know. I don't think they exist anywhere anymore, do they?
Yeah, not anymore. We had Borders.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I applied for a job at the local Borders, and got a interview in like the day that I handed in my CV, and I arrived on Monday. On Friday, I was actually working the tills, which was amazing. It was like, getting trained up, and it was just so fantastic. And I worked there until pretty much the day that Borders shut in the UK, which was in, I think, 2009, I believe it was, when they went bust. And then I got a job in an absolutely amazing tea room just across the road, Betty's. It's like an institution in the UK. It's one of the most famous tea rooms there. And they do really, really good tea and cakes and stuff. And it's really wonderful. So I worked there for years after that, really enjoyed that. So I, again, had like an amazing team, fantastic colleagues and stuff. And doing something that you like and working with people, selling things.
It
really
helps.
Oh God, it does. You have to like people when you work in retail, because
Yep.
It just helps.
Yeah,
And,
I work retail, so I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like it's really nice to sort of work with people and help them finding what they want and introducing them to new stuff.
Yep.
And but I was already, when I was working in Betty's, I kept cutting down days and doing sort of shorter and shorter days. And at one point I was just only working 1 day a week because I was focusing so much of my time on modern folk embroidery that at one point I was like, am I going to continue doing this nonsense of 1 day a week? Because by that time, it was kind of like that kind of, the money of 1 day a week is so little.
Right.
If I don't have the mental place of having to go to a job, cleaning your uniform, putting all that stuff, because it's not just that day that you're working, it's the day before when you have to do laundry and all. I thought, like, if I cut that out, I can focus all my energy in my work. And I did. So it was literally like, I think about 5 years ago, I quit my job there. And it was the best thing ever. Since then, I have been focused, like, laser sharp on one thing only. And being able to do that, it is like, and this is going to sound so soppy, like when you go like, thanks to everyone. But it is literally thanks to everyone, like all these beautiful people all over the world who buy the patterns and, like who share the patterns. And because that's such an important thing as well, when people talk about stuff, that they, stitch and share it and stuff, because then other people find you. And that just literally has been the best thing. So it's, just going full time and then being welcomed into this wonderful community. That is literally the best thing.
That is awesome.
And
it all stemmed from that blog post that pushed you on up into social media. Expanding, and that's amazing.
Yeah, the blog, she's still doing that actually. I'm terrible with names, but her blog is called Posie Gets Cozy. And she is based in Portland.
I'm from Portland.
No, not Portland. She's based in Oregon, but in sort of the Portland area, I believe.
That's so cool. That's where I'm from. So it's pretty.
Yeah, it's stunning. It's so beautiful. She has like this place. It's quite near a little river in, the beautiful, I think it's Douglas firs, isn't it? Those big trees that you have there.
Yeah, our fir trees are awesome. Love them.
It's beautiful. It's just stunning. But yeah, go check her out. I'll send you an email as well, and then I don't know if you can put a link in her. She also designs cross stitch patterns, by the way, and yeah, she does. Oh God, let me just quickly find that now for you before I log off. Then Posie gets Posie.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'll definitely link everything down below if you want to.
People don't really seem to be talking a lot about her, and her patterns are honestly, they are the cutest. And she gave me an amazing boost. So if I can give, well, I'm sure she doesn't really need a giant boost there, but Alicia Paulson. I was like, oh God, it's Alicia, isn't it? Yeah, Alicia Paulson is her name, and she is an amazing crafter. She is such a creative person, and she does, she does all the amazing things. And
very cool.
I think she has a shop, but I will send you the website that she has, and then I'll see if I can find a link. Usually she does kits and stuff, so you can get them. But they're just wonderful. They're really nice. Nice.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody will go check her out. And I don't even think you need a plug at all, but they should go check you out as well.
I can always use the plugs. It's always good.
But thank you so much. I know that you've been crazy busy, and I appreciate you taking time out to chat with me. This has been amazing to learn more about you and the history of, and all the pieces that you showed. I wasn't expecting that, so that was awesome. I know people are going to love that as well. So
no, thank you so much. It's been really lovely chatting to you, and I've made long answers, so my apologies that I've taken up all your Flosstube time, but I've had a really good time sitting down with you. So.
And people, like the viewers, they love the longer interviews, and they're going to love learning more about you. So, but yeah, no, it was great. I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic.
All right. So we'll say bye to everybody on Flosstube.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.